Welcome to episode 676 of the Entertainment 2.0 podcast, brought to you by thedigitalmediazone.com. I'm Josh Pollard, and this is the show that puts you in control of your favorite movies, music, shows, and games. No Richard this week. He really wanted to be here, but he just wasn't feeling well, so we hope that Richard gets well soon and can be back for the next episode. We don't have any feedback for you all tonight, so if you want to send us your questions or comments about things that we're chatting about, you can email us entertainment20@thedigitalmediazone.com or reach out to us on socials. We'll have all of that information at the end of the show, or you can just head on over to the show notes at www.thedigitalmediazone.com. So let's get into the news this week. And we're going to start the way that we so frequently do. And unfortunately, start with the news of another streaming service raising their prices. This time around, somewhat surprisingly, it's Fubo. And I think it's a little bit surprising because just within the last few weeks, we've been talking about how Disney is working to acquire them. So it seems a little weird to see this price increase at that time. I'm sure this has been planned for longer than the announcement of the merger there, but it still just kind of felt like weird timing, even if it's not. So what are the actual details here? Well, this is actually fairly simple because while Fubo has many tiers, they're all going up by the same amount. That's right. No matter what tier you're on, the price is going up by $5 a month, which isn't terrible. YouTube TV went up $10 a month last month. So, that's better. Although it does make this actually even the lowest cost tier of Fubo, which is called Essential, will actually be more expensive than YouTube TV now, because going up by $5 a month makes it $85 a month, which is $2 more than YouTube TV and Hulu Plus Live TV. The cost are going up for exactly the reason you would expect them to say. They are going up, quote, due to increased programming cost. And that means that the content producers are charging more money for their shows, for their networks, for their streams, and Fubo needs to pass those price increases on to the viewers. So that's why it's going up by $5. It's completely to be expected. So one thing that we didn't really talk that much about is they do actually have a new tier that they rolled out just last month, and it's called the Essential tier. And it's confusing because you look at it and you go, all right, so Essential is the base option, and it's $85 a month. And then there's a Pro plan, which is also $85 a month. And so you're left to wonder, why is it the same price? So then you go and look at the features. Oh, well, this Pro plan offers regional sports networks. We just call them RSNs around here. And you get them for the same price as the Essential plan that doesn't include them. Well, that's where the fine print comes in. See, the real difference between the Essential and the Pro plan is Essential doesn't include all of those RSNs, and Pro does. But the real tricky bit there is the Pro plan actually costs more because those RSNs have extra fees that are tacked on to your monthly base subscription. And it's different based on what market you're in and what RSNs you get, because they all cost different amounts of money. So if you go for the Pro plan that includes RSNs, you could be paying up to $16 a month in fees for those plans. So that's the confusing bit about the Essential and Pro plans. But the Essential plan, like if you don't need those regional sports networks, then you're absolutely saving yourself some money by going with the Essential tier. The real question, though, is why would you do that? Like, if you're looking at Fubo, you're probably doing it because you are a sports fan. You want to watch more sports. That's where Fubo started. It's still where it excels. So why would you even sign up for Fubo if you didn't want the RSNs? I mean, at that point, maybe just subscribe to YouTube TV or Hulu with live TV. But so that's your option. But the other thing that's important to point out is that while it's easy to think that all of these higher priced streaming services that are like cable replacement services, that they all basically offer the same channel lineup, but that's not really true. Fubo, of course, has its history of being the service with the most sports options, but for them to offer more sports channels for the same price as some of their competitors, it does mean that they have to cut out some other things that their competitors do offer. And where that really hits hard with Fubo is they don't have channels from Warner Brothers Discovery or A&E or AMC. And you're like, oh, what are the Warner Brothers Discovery channels? All right, so that's Discovery. What else is that? CNN, TNT, TBS, HGTV, Discovery, Food Network? None of those are on Fubo. And a lot of those channels are the ones that I think of when I consider signing up for one of these streaming television services. CNN, it's one of the most popular streaming news or cable news networks. TNT and TBS, okay, that's not that big of a deal, but I don't know. It seems like everybody turns on HGTV or Food Network as like the channel that they put on in the background while they're doing other things. So to not get access to those and A&E and AMC, that feels like a pretty big loss. So I guess if you're considering Fubo, especially because you were thinking that having easier access to those RSNs might appeal to you, well, double check that list of channels, which admittedly is kind of a pain because you're talking about hundreds of channels to sort through. And that's just going to take you some extra time to figure out which of these packages have the channels that you're looking for. All right, well, let's move on to one more video story. And on the surface, you're going to be like, Josh, how is this a video story? So the news here is really that Apple updated their Apple Sports app that you're probably, if you're a sports user with an iPhone, you're probably using that Apple Sports app to get scores or maybe find out who's playing against your favorite team tonight. Well, there's a new feature that they added that's maybe not getting the most fanfare, but if you're a sports fan who struggles with knowing which of the what seems like 100 different possible places to watch my favorite team, which service is actually airing the game tonight? Well, Apple Sports now tells you that. If you open the app, you go to the game that you want to watch, it shows you right there on that screen what network it's playing on, whether it's on, a major network like ABC, or if it's on ESPN, or even some of the more niche networks like NFL Network or NHL Network, things like that. So they all show up there. Is this the only place you can get this information? No, the ESPN app does a pretty good job of doing the same thing. But if you're already in the Apple Sports app and you've got other reasons to be in there, this is a nice way of finding out just how it is that you can watch your favorite sports team. And for those of you who don't watch sports, you might be thinking, really, Josh, is it really that complicated? It is. The sports, every sport, it has partnerships with multiple different networks. And so you never really know where your favorite team is going to be playing that night. It could be on ESPN, which, of course, requires a different streaming package that you might not have versus, just being on ABC, which maybe you can watch with an over-the-air antenna. Who knows? So this really is a problem. It is challenging to find out where your team is playing. And the Apple Sports app latest update does make it a whole lot easier for you. Let's move on to our audio news, which typically means music news, and that is true this week. because Spotify and the Universal Music Group have signed a massive new multi-year agreement. And on the surface, we don't actually know what that means for the future of Spotify subscribers or people who like artists that are published by Universal Music Group. But we can take some guesses because last year, UMG pitched something that they've been calling Streaming 2.0. And this agreement with Spotify could help bring that vision into reality. So what is Streaming 2.0 according to UMG? Well, the main point behind it is that they think that the ideal world is one where they offer essentially what could be considered a superfan tier for these streaming music services. So what do superfans want that they might be willing to pay more money for? Well, increased streaming audio quality is the big functional one, which we're still waiting for Spotify to launch Spotify Hi-Fi, a lossless streaming solution. But there's also other content type things that superfans could get access to in some sort of superfan tier. It could be things like early access to music. It could be exclusive deluxe editions of albums. It could be artist Q&As. It could be any of these things. What I hope it wouldn't be is exclusive access to just a regular new album. You know, think about if Taylor Swift released a new album and it was only available through the superfan tier. Like, that would be terrible. But if there's just a special deluxe edition of an album that might have a couple of extra songs, well, maybe. And even in some of their marketing materials for the superfan tier, it doesn't even necessarily say exclusive access to a deluxe edition. It could just be early access to a deluxe edition. So they're thinking about lots of possible options for what a superfan tier might look like. And they've done their research, and they say that 20% of streaming music subscribers are willing to pay more for an enhanced subscription tier with features and benefits like the ones that I've been describing here. And that sounds about right to me. So I could see this coming. But does it work if they've only really, like, if Spotify only has this sort of deal with UMG? Does this still work? Like, are we going to be willing to pay more for early access or, you know, exclusive deluxe editions and artist Q&As if they're only from UMG? What about all the other music publishers? That doesn't sound great. So I'll be curious to see if this really is what Spotify is working on, because I think the concept makes sense, but they need buy-in from other publishers. It can't just be UMG. Even if they're enormous, it can't just be them. And while it would be far more simple to basically say, well, we've got Spotify Premium and it's everything that you want to listen to whenever. And then we've got this superfan tier that sits above that, and it gets you increased streaming quality plus some of these other features like early access to songs. That's an easier model to understand. There's premium and then there's superfan, right? But what if I don't care about some of this superfan stuff and all I want is the increased streaming quality? Because that's really what I'm more interested in, I think. I don't know. What do you think? Do you fit into this 20% of people who would be willing to pay more for your monthly music streaming service to get these types of benefits? The idea of paying more to get lossless audio streaming, that's not new. But what about some of these other things? So let us know. Write in, leave a comment, hit us up on social media. I want to know if they launch something like this, even if it's not Spotify, like UMG, they just inked a new deal with Amazon Music within the last month or two also. So UMG wants this to become a reality, but let's also not kid ourselves. The real reason they're doing this is because they want to generate more revenue. If you pay Spotify more money for this tier, then it's more money going to UMG. And they'll call it something like a Superfan tier because it'll make it sound like, oh, well, if I do this, then I bet the artist that I'm listening to will get more money. We'll have to wait and see about that. That they might not get any extra money at all. So we'll see. Like, I don't love ending a story by saying we'll see, but it does feel likely that something like this will be coming, and it probably will be coming this year. So we'll have to see if Spotify launches it, and if they do, will it just be with UMG? And will there be multiple tiers for superfans? Will there be an audiophile tier and a superfan tier? Okay, so into some gaming news. But if you're thinking, oh, that's it for the stuff that I care about because I don't really listen to the gaming news, don't leave just yet, because we have another section after gaming this week, and it's one that I think is pretty interesting. So stick around even if you're not into the gaming news. But for gaming, two things that have happened recently. So last week, Xbox held their Developer Direct 2025. Normally, probably wouldn't even really talk about it because it was basically just giving more details about some games and launching or announcing some new games, although they also surprise launched a new game the day of the Developer Direct. That's not really what I found the most interesting about all of this. What I really liked was that every single game that they talked about in this Developer Direct, including the games published by third-party publishers, every single one of them will be launching day one on Game Pass and are part of the Xbox Play Anywhere program. And as a reminder about Xbox Play Anywhere, it's the capability that means you can buy a game on your Xbox and you can play it on your Xbox or on your Windows PC. And it's not even just about having access to the game on console and PC, but it also means cloud saves that work across platforms. So if you're playing a Play Anywhere game on your Xbox at home, and then you grab your Windows laptop or your gaming handheld like your Legion Go or your Asus ROG Ally to play on the go, you can pick up and play right where you left off because it's all in the cloud. And I really, really think that Xbox Play Anywhere could be one of the biggest features that keeps gamers in the Xbox ecosystem as we move forward. Gaming handhelds, they're not going anywhere. They're only going to continue to get bigger. And if you weren't sure about that, then just go back to last week when we were talking about what will undoubtedly be the biggest gaming console sold this year. And it's a portable. It is a handheld. It is the Nintendo Switch 2. Switch 2 is coming out this year. They're going to sell tens of millions of them, in addition to all of these other essentially PC gaming handhelds that we're talking about, like the Legion Go S that was announced at CES, like the MSI. Oh man, they all have crazy names. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if Valve has a new Steam Deck this year. It's been a few years now since the Steam Deck launched. Yes, we got Steam Deck OLED, but that hardware, it's getting a little old. It's time for something new. Gaming handhelds are going to continue to be big. And yes, we will see more of them running SteamOS, but Windows still gives you more options than SteamOS because it includes Xbox natively and in some ways makes all of the other storefronts a lot easier to use too. So if you want to use GOG or the Epic Game Store or Ubisoft, or like, they all just natively run on Windows. And so while it's maybe not, I shouldn't even say maybe, it's definitely not the easiest user interface, especially not when it's compared to something like the Nintendo Switch. Gamers love the fact that they get access to everything. And when you've got Xbox Play Anywhere, it truly is getting access to everything, because that ability to buy a game once and play it on all of your devices is pretty awesome. So really excited to see more third-party games being announced, not only for day one Game Pass inclusion, but also for Xbox Play Anywhere. One more gaming story, and this one from Sony. They announced their latest slate of PlayStation Plus games, but again, we don't really generally talk about those here. But there was also at the bottom of the article a news announcement to go along with the announcement of the new monthly games being added to PlayStation Plus, and that is that they're changing what games will be available here. So let me start by just reading the quote here. They write, "As many of our players are currently playing on PlayStation 5 and have shifted toward redeeming and accessing PS5 titles from the monthly games and game catalog benefit, PlayStation Plus is also evolving with this trend and will focus on offering PS5 titles through the monthly Game Pass and game catalog benefit starting January 2026. As we shift to PS5, PS4 games will no longer be a key benefit and will only be occasionally offered for PlayStation Plus monthly games and game catalog starting January 2026. So first off, we've got a year before this becomes a reality. So while I still have a lot of questions about what this actually means, we've got about a year for them to clarify this message. So what's clear? Two things, really. One is nothing is really changing until January 2026. The other thing that's pretty clear is, for the most part, you should expect that they won't really offer PS4 games as part of the free monthly games. It could still happen. They left themselves some wiggle room in there, but it's probably not going to happen. The part that's really unclear is, what do they do with the PS4 games that are in the game catalog? And to dig into this further, it probably helps to zoom out a little bit and remind you about the multiple subscription tiers that Sony offers in PlayStation Plus. There is the essential tier, which is really just like the ability to play games online, and it includes a couple of free games a month. There's the premium tier and the extra tier. Those two tiers, so extra is more like Game Pass, where they have the big game catalog that includes PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games. And that middle tier allows you to play any of the games in that catalog, which is around 600 games in that catalog. And then there's the premium tier, which includes all of that stuff, plus online streaming, plus it has an additional catalog called the Classics catalog. And there is where you can find PlayStation 2 games, PlayStation 3 games, things like that. So what happens next January with PS4 games? Like, you could read this message and interpret it as, yeah, we're going to remove most of the PS4 games from the game catalog. If you're in that middle tier, say goodbye to your PS4 games. Is that what it's saying? Not necessarily, but it might be saying that. If that is what they're saying, what happens to the PS4 games? Do they go into the Classics catalog with the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 games? Maybe. And then that means if you want to play those PlayStation 4 games, well, now you're paying for the most expensive tier, which is $20 a month right now. And who knows, might be even more by next January. I really hope that that's not the case, because it really seems not a good thing for the consumer. It also means, like, if they were to do that, the game catalog in that middle tier service would shrink dramatically. There are 566 PlayStation 4 games in the catalog, 265, so almost exactly 300 fewer titles for PlayStation 5 as there are for PlayStation 4. And that would really stink to lose access to all of them. And you might be thinking, well, Josh, like everybody's playing on PlayStation 5. That's what they said. But that's not what they said. They said many of our players are currently playing on PlayStation 5. Many. They didn't even say most, because it's not most, right? Despite the fact that PlayStation 5 came out over 4 years ago, it came out in the fall of 2020, there's still the majority of PlayStation players are playing on PlayStation 4. Same is true with Xbox. Like, this isn't a slap at Sony. Same is true with Xbox. There are still more people playing on Xbox One than there are on Xbox Series X and S. And it's partly because they can. So many new games are still put out on the previous generation console, even though that previous generation console came out in 2013. These are over 11-year-old console generations. And I think that, like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Sony does decide, nope, we are ripping the PlayStation 4 games out of the game catalog. We are moving them into the Classics catalog because we either want you to pay more money for PlayStation Plus if you want to be playing those PS4 games, or we want you to just bite the bullet and finally go out and buy a PlayStation 5. I really think that this is largely about selling more PlayStation 5 consoles. And they're really hoping that maybe you're going to just jump all the way to the PS5 Pro. Sony's never been pro-consumer. And so it makes it easier to be cynical about what they might actually be doing with this. So I'm sure we will get many more details as the year goes along. But right now, if I had to place money on this, I would bet PS4 games eventually make it to Classics catalog and they get removed completely, almost completely. Like, let's say 90% of them get removed from the mid-tier game catalog. That's what I'm expecting. All right, I told you we've got one more story this week that is from a slightly different category of topics than we typically discuss: eBooks, or books in general. If you're a book reader, then you should know about a website called bookshop.org. I didn't know about this site because, well, up until now, they've only sold physical books. But they've got a really, really interesting model. So bookshop.org opened in 2020. And maybe the very first thing you're asking is like, if this is a bookshop where they sell things, why is it .org? Why isn't it .com? Well, it's partly because they have a really interesting business model. See, bookshop.org, they want to partner with your local independent bookstores, because your local independent bookstore is kind of awesome and we want them to stay in business. We don't want Amazon to end up being the only place where you can buy any kind of books. So in 2020, they opened with an interesting model where when you go to buy a game or buy a book from bookshop.org, they ask you, what's your favorite local bookstore? And you put it in. And then when you buy that book, they will send the profits from that book to your local bookstore to help keep them in business. Even though you're not going down to the store to buy the book in person, they'll still get a cut of the money so that they can stay in business. It's a really awesome business model. The news here, because you're like, Josh, come on, like, you don't talk about physical books. You're right, I don't. And I don't read physical books really, but I do read eBooks. And that's the news here. Bookshop.org is now selling eBooks. And we're not even just talking about like, well, okay, so they inked a deal with like 2 really small book publishers, and so I can get a few books, but they probably cost more than the other places. Oh no, my friends. This is exactly what you're hoping it is. They've inked a deal with basically every major publisher, and they're offering more than 3 million ebooks in their store. And the price? Well, the price of ebooks is set by the publisher. It's not set by Amazon or Kobo or Google Books or whoever it is that you're buying your books from currently. They're set by the publisher, which means whatever price you've been paying at Amazon or whatever other digital storefront you've been purchasing from, it's going to be the same price at bookshop.org. So there's absolutely no reason to buy from Amazon or someone else when you could buy from bookshop.org and support a local business? I suppose maybe there's one reason, and it might be kind of big. If you buy books from bookshop.org, currently, the only way to read them is through their website or through their app. So if previously you've been buying everything on or from Amazon to read on your Kindle because your Kindle is your favorite way to read ebooks, well, this doesn't really work for you right now because these books still have DRM, and so they have to be read basically in the ecosystem where they're purchased. So you're going to have to download the bookshop.org app from iOS or from Android onto your tablet or phone or whatever. Or you can read these if you're sitting at a computer or any other device. You can read these in a web browser, and that's where you're going to have to read the books. Now, they're working with partners. They're working with Kobo to potentially make it so that you can read books purchased from bookshop.org on a Kobo e-reader. And they say they're talking to Amazon, but I wouldn't expect that to come anytime soon. So if you are absolutely attached to your Amazon Kindle or your Kobo e-reader or something else like that, then this doesn't really work out for you. But if you're reading on a phone or you're reading on a tablet, do this. Like, why wouldn't you do this? Other than you like having all of your books in one place, because that's the problem here, right? It's the same thing that we were talking about with gamers earlier. Steam works really well on on gaming PCs because Steam is the biggest gaming platform. It is the Amazon Kindle of PC gaming. And so you can open up one app, the Steam app, and get access to essentially all of your games. This is what everybody's been doing with their ebooks on Kindle. And so that is going to be the biggest challenge that bookshop.org has to face to win you over for your business. But man, it's got to be worth it. Like, how much better could the Kindle app be than this bookshop.org app? I don't know. I don't read ebooks enough to give you a fine point-by-point analysis of which app is better and which app you're going to like more if you're reading on a phone or a tablet. But this is at least worth investigating because you do have that possibility of making a real difference to your local bookstore. And it's not just about it being a local bookstore. That local bookstore is owned by a local person in your neighborhood, right? By supporting your local bookstores, you're supporting your neighbors. It's really cool. It's really cool to be able to do this online, buy an ebook, read it on your device, and still be helping out your local bookstore. So head on over to bookshop.org to check this out and maybe buy yourself some ebooks. So that's it for the news. Let's jump into what's going on in our entertainment centers. And it's kind of lame for me. It's been a really, really crazy week for me. I have gotten some gaming in, but it's not really anything that dramatic or new. It's mostly Diablo, a little bit of Call of Duty, things like that. Again, most of that Diablo time, it's been spent on my Legion Go. I am absolutely loving this device. I will give it a more thorough review soon, but man, I love just curling up on the couch with this thing and playing some Diablo or whatever else I want. It's really nice. It's really nice. Call of Duty, though, still mostly playing that on the Xbox, and that's pretty much it on the gaming side. No movies for me this week, and on TV, well, Severance is back on the air, so Severance Season 2, Episode 2. I love what they've done with these first 2 episodes this season. It's been a really cool change to how they've been doing the show. Really like it. Again, if you're watching the show, you should be listening to the official podcast also. But again, it's a spoiler cast, so listen after watching the episode or else you'll ruin the whole show for yourself. So don't do that. I don't even have an ebook or an audiobook, that I'm reading right now. So that's how busy it's been. I'm turning into Richard and getting behind even on my podcast. So hopefully this week that all changes. I get caught up and hopefully I'll be checking out some other content. But, well, that's actually maybe not all that likely because it's also Lunar New Year, and we celebrate that pretty big in my house. So that'll be, even though we're celebrating it over the weekend instead of, actually on Lunar New Year, the actual day. So that's what's going on in my entertainment center. If you want to get a hold of us, we're all over the place. We, of course, have everything over at www.thedigitalmediazone.com. You can find our show notes there with links to everything that we talked about on this episode and links to all of the places we're at on social media. I'm primarily on Blue Sky at this point. I'm just at Josh Pollard over there, but I'm also on Twitter, same name, Josh Pollard. The website is at DigiMediaZone on Twitter. Richard is on Mastodon, primarily at Richard Gunther over there. He is on Blue Sky. He's richardgunther.com on Blue Sky. And lastly, especially for those of you who listen this late into the show, I've been asking over the last couple of weeks, send me a DM on any of these social media services because I'd like to ask you, give you just kind of a mini survey on what you think about this show and how we can make it an even better show for you. Huge thanks to all of you who have already reached out, not even just for answering the questions in the survey. It's really just nice to hear from you all. Talking to my screen, to my microphone every week is one thing, but it is so much more fun for us when we get to actually talk with you more. And that is the beauty of social media. So please, if you're listening at this point and you haven't reached out yet, please DM me. It's 3 simple questions that I'm going to give you for our survey. So join all of the other listeners who have already done that. But that's going to do it for episode 676. I'm Josh Pollard. Thanks for listening to Entertainment 2.0. Adios.